Is cheese bad for you? Okay. When it comes to this question in particular, it actually comes from this previous week. We had a group Zoom call, which we do every week in the FIT40 family, where all the clients jump on. And one of the clients found out that cheese just did not fit into her day, or the type she was eating was not working. Because when it comes to her in particular, we were working on bringing her saturated fat level down, because for many, many people, getting your saturated fat level down is incredible for like reducing risk when it comes to things like heart disease and things like that, and bringing your cholesterol into healthy levels. So that's one of the reasons that we really focus on bringing that saturated fat down to where it needs to be. But before we get into the weeds on that, the reason that she brought this up was because she was having this cheese as a snack, and she's like, "Oh, I thought because it had like a lot of protein in it, it was a solid choice for a snack." And I'm like, "Yeah, honestly, it's not a bad choice." And she's like, "But the saturated fat content was so high that her daily amount just was too high overall." And I'm like, "Yeah, that makes sense." And this is what we want to really figure out when it comes to nutrition, is what exactly is that level that's like too much? Because cheese isn't bad. Like, there are no bad foods when unless it's, number one, like trans fats, we can all pretty much agree, not good. And when it comes to other foods and ingredients, unless you are allergic to it, unless it is inedible or it counteracts with medication, like grapefruit juice, for example, is one of the big ones that can mess with certain meds. Unless it falls into those categories, there's no food that you should like 100% avoid. It just comes down to figuring out the right amounts that you can fit into your day. So that being said, like, what is the right amount? So the American Heart Association recommends less than 6% of your total calories from saturated fat. So just to put that in perspective, if you were eating, say, 1,500 calories, 10% of that would be about 10 grams of saturated fat or less. If you want to do a quick calculation, like if you have your calories, just multiply it by 0.1, and that'll give you how many calories from saturated fat, and then divide that by 9, because fat is 9 calories per gram. So that'll give you your limit as far as where you want to go. And then the RDA, like the recommended daily allowance, is about 10%. So it's like, if you can get it under 10%, awesome. If you can get it below 6%, even better. Now, why is this like a bad thing? What could potentially come of this, especially because you have all these keto and carnivore people trying to justify the fact that, oh, cholesterol is not bad at high amounts, when in reality, it is very bad. If you have elevated levels of LDL, that can put you in a very bad spot when it comes to things like heart disease, okay? Because it can raise your total and your total cholesterol and your LDL, and increase that risk factor for heart disease. And this isn't like a matter of opinion. Like, this has been proven over and over and over and over again. And a lot of these fad dieters that are in the keto and carnivore crowd are just trying to justify the fact that they eat like children and they avoid fruits and vegetables. All right. And there was actually a study that got really popular about a month ago now, that we just found out was very much misrepresented. And they said, well, elevated LDL does not increase plaque buildup in the arteries, when in reality, they basically had two groups. One had elevated LDL and the other group had very elevated LDL, and they didn't see a huge difference. That's basically like saying, okay, we're going to take these people that smoke a pack a day and compare them to people that smoke 2 packs a day and see if there's any difference in health outcomes. And it's like, obviously they're both in a shitty group. You don't want to be in either group. So that being said, you don't want to be in that group that has an elevated level of saturated fat, because it can lead to bad things. So what is saturated fat? Let's talk about that. There's different types of fats: saturated and there's unsaturated. Now, when it comes to unsaturated, there's 2 types. There's poly and mono unsaturated, or if you want to sound funny at the dinner table, MUFAs and PUFAs. All right. And the MUFAs and PUFAs are the things that you want to focus on having. The saturated fat are those types of fats that are the creamy, solid, like you physically cannot see through them. And the MUFAs and PUFAs are the things like olive oil, avocado oil, like things that you can see through, that are these unsaturated fats. And let's talk about what foods have the most of saturated, because that way you can say, okay, these foods have it, so I should probably limit my intake and be very picky and choosy about it. So big one is fatty meats and fatty dairy. Like, if you find low fat or lean cuts, then yeah, you could definitely find some options that have much less saturated fat content. But on the whole, in general, it's usually fatty meat and dairy. Tropical fats, fun fact, The coconut oil that you hear all these amazing things about, tons of saturated fat. The MCT oils and things like that, a lot of saturated fat. Palm oil, palm kernel oil, and some baked and fried foods. All right. The easiest way to know if what you're consuming has a lot of saturated fat, and honestly, you'll be surprised. There's some like protein bars that have insane amounts of saturated fat, and you're like, whoa, 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 I wanted the protein. I didn't come here for that. Okay. The easiest way to know is look at the label and you'll see where it says fats. It gives like a raw number of how many grams. And then underneath that, it tells you what that number comes from when it comes to saturated and unsaturated fats. So you can see, okay, how much is actually in this. And an easy way to bring that number down throughout the day is just make smart substitutions. Like I said, if you can find a lower fat option, like if you can find something that has much less saturated fat, or let's say it does have a good amount of fat, but it's all from unsaturated fats, then opt for that. Okay. Or try other ingredients in place of things that typically have a lot of saturated fat. So like if you like Mexican food, for example, and you load up on the cheese, say, you know what? Can I just like go extra on the pico de gallo and just say I'm good on the cheese and that'll scratch the itch enough and I'll be okay? Then do that. Or if it's, say, you're used to having butter or beef tallow now, since that's really popular, also has a shitload of saturated fat. Pardon my French. If you want to get off that train and start doing smarter things for your heart health, then you can swap that butter or beef tallow for things like olive oil or avocado oil. And then the other thing you could do too is just limit the frequency. It could be a situation where you're like, is this a celebration or an obligation? Like you might have heard me talk about in previous episodes. It's like, if this is a dinner out with your family for the first time in forever, and you can't even remember the last time you went out to a restaurant, then have the fatty steak, have that ribeye or whatever, as long as when you go home, you're not doing that and raising your saturated fats, because this is about what you do most of the time, not, oh, you have to eat like this 100% of the time. It's doing this the majority of the time. And when it comes to celebrations, like obviously going out to dinner and things like that would count as one if it's very infrequent. But if it's every week, then yeah, you got to understand that, hey, that's not a celebration. That's just a routine that you're in. Or it might even be what I would consider an obligation, where it's like, okay, you're meeting your friends for happy hour every single week, or there's a work dinner that you have to go to. In those cases, opt for the leaner cut stuff like chicken or fish or stuff like that. And understand that you're doing it because you want to drive not just that day's saturated fat down, but that month, that year's amount of saturated fat down. That's what's going to make the difference. And then also understand, is it goal? Like, what is the goal? Understand, what are you chasing right now? So if you are trying to get yourself in the healthiest position possible, then you know what, even if it is a celebration, and you don't have an issue ordering that chicken or that fish, then go for it. Just understand that it comes down to your values, your goals, and what exactly you want out of this, as long as you have the information that you need to make the decision that you want. And also, on a restaurant note, another thing to take into account is, are they cooking with butter and oil, which a lot of them do. So if no butter is an option, that could save you a ton unsaturated fat as well. But again, if it's a celebration, have at it. But if it's an obligation, something quick and easy that you could just ask the waiter if it's an option. And then when it comes to this overall message that I'm trying to send to you guys, just understand nutrition is a gigantic puzzle, and everybody's puzzle is different. It comes down to preferences, because we like to eat the way that we like to eat. It's about figuring out how to like to eat in a good way that serves you in the best way possible. Genetics is another one. Like me in particular, I eat pretty damn good and probably still going to need a little extra help just due to family genetics that are making it extra hard to the point where it could potentially mess me up later in life. So if you have to be on medications, even though you're doing all the right things, it doesn't mean you're a bad person. It doesn't mean that you're not trying hard enough. It just means that you did not hit the genetic lottery, and most of us didn't. Okay. Totally okay with that. If that's the case, just do your best on the controllables. The environment. Some of us live in different environments. Some people live in food deserts. Some people live in straight abundance. Some people really live in places where they only have fresh fruits and veggies and all that good stuff, like overseas, and they're in a much better position. Like they have public transportation everywhere instead of driving, like you might have heard with my podcast with Andy Morgan. people have different situations and you got to figure out how to thrive in your own. And then there's also culture. There's like pressure when it comes to family. There's cultural foods that we have in the mix that can make it harder to hit certain targets. And you got to understand how to adjust and everything like that. So you just got to figure out what's best for you and what you can live with at the end of the day with all the information that you have, and just be at peace with the fact that, hey, this is how I'm choosing to live. Now, this is the basis of like what I do with FIT40 coaching. So if you're interested in experiencing that and seeing what it's all about, you can click that link below. Now, if you just want some workouts to follow that can help along with bringing the saturated fat down, because exercise is incredible for improving all kinds of health markers. So definitely need exercise in the mix. If you haven't started already, grab my toned in 20 workouts down below. You could do them at home with a band, with body weight, with dumbbells, whatever you got or whatever you don't got, you can make it happen. And then if you want just a quick look at your nutrition and see what can I do like today to make a little bit of a difference to get moving in the right direction, then I do free nutrition assessments for that specific purpose. So if you just want some free help, guaranteed, no sales pitch. If you do want to talk about coaching, we set up a totally different call. But if you just want that little bit of help to nudge you in the right direction, sign up for a nutrition assessment. That link's also down below as well. All right. So that's it for today. Hope that you got a lot out of this one. I know you came for the cheese, but you stayed for the saturated fat and the healthy information. All right. So I appreciate you making it all the way through. I'll see you next time. But until then, go kick some ass. Bye-bye.